No, I'm not gonna stop, and you can't make me stop. Because it was a terrible movie and she's a terrible character. I'm gonna make fun of her. Alright, I suppose that makes sense. Alright, bye. That was my producer. It turns out that I have been making too much fun of Captain Marvel as of late. I didn't even know that was possible, but there you go. Anyway, since I refuse to stop complaining about how god-awful that movie was, they're gonna install a counter to keep track of how often I mock that sorry excuse for a movie. Ladies and gentlemen, the Captain Marvel Sucks counter! And just to make sure that this counter is up to date, and there are very few things that I hate more than Captain Marvel. Why was Carol so ready to believe the Skrulls were trustworthy after spending the last 6 years of her life absorbing Kree propaganda about how they were deceitful parasitic monsters? And because this cold opening is basically one big middle finger to Captain Marvel, now that we got that bit of housekeeping out of the way, let's talk about bad Avatar episodes. Hello everyone, and welcome to What Do I Know, the show where I don't know what I can say about Avatar The Last Airbender that hasn't already been said. I mean, the characters, the story, the world building, the action, it's all so masterful that it is broadly considered to be one of the greatest animated shows, if not one of the greatest shows, period, of all time. But even the greatest of shows is bound to have its fair share of stinkers. Not just mistakes in the writing, but just some bad episodes in general. The go-to example for most people in Avatar's case is The Great Divide, because it mostly consists of pointless arguments and bad moralization, but you've also got episodes like The Headband for just being a retread of Footloose, The Painted Lady for reasons that I've never really understood, and Bato of the Water Tribe for Aang allegedly acting out of character. But I would make the argument that the actual worst episode of the show is Avatar Day. I don't know what the general fanbase consensus is for this episode, but I've also never seen this episode come up when the topic of Avatar's worst episode is discussed. And that amazes me, because this whole episode is a ridiculous, farcical waste of time. It is pure filler. And don't get the wrong idea, filler isn't necessarily bad. Technically, most of Tales of Ba Sing Se is filler, and far from being a bad episode, it's widely considered to be one of Avatar's best. But Avatar Day is the worst kind of filler. The kind that doesn't offer any insight into the characters, doesn't make any real sense, and just serves to pad out the show to make certain that the season has 20 episodes exactly. But if I'm seriously going to make the argument that this episode is on par with The Great Divide, I'd better start elaborating. So let's-a go. We open with Momo saving Sokka from waking up with a spider in his mouth.
What are you doing in my mouth? Momo, you need to be a little more sensitive to my boundaries.
It's a shame Momo can't talk. He'd be able to explain to Sokka that he just saved him from a considerably worse wake-up call. I'd take monkey's hand in my mouth over spider bite in my mouth any day of the week.
Give up! You're completely surrounded!
Taken by surprise, the gang leave in a hurry after Aang and Katara retrieve their staff and waterbending scrolls respectively. Unfortunately, in their hurry, they forget to grab Sokka's boomerang.
Oh, I see. So there's time to get your scrolls and time to get your staff, but no time for my boomerang?
That's correct.
Oh.
Well, in their defense, Sokka, you guys are still on the ground when they realized they needed to retrieve those things. It's a little late to go back for something after you literally just got away. We cut to later in the day when the gang are purchasing supplies while Sokka mourns the loss of his boomerang.
I feel like I've lost part of my identity. Imagine if you lost your arrow, or if Katara lost her hair loopies.
Well, they wouldn't kick up a fuss, Sokka. We know this because they do lose those things when you guys go undercover as Fire Nation citizens in Season 3.
I'm not going out if I can't wear my arrow proudly.
Okay, bad example. The group pay for their supplies and the store owner starts heading towards a nearby village.
Have a nice Avatar Day.
Avatar Day?
You guys are going to the festival, right?
That's right, the nearby village of Chin, Katara mentions the town's name later in the episode, is celebrating their version of Avatar Day, which, judging by Aang's reaction to the holiday, is not particularly well known.
There's a holiday for the Avatar. Who knew?
And if you've seen my review of Flowers for She-Ra, you probably know exactly what my problem with this is. They're throwing this party in the middle of a flipping war! I mean, the episode does a pretty good job establishing that this particular town doesn't have the brightest bulbs around, and it also helps that the town isn't throwing this party while the enemy is literally camping outside their front door. But throwing a party in the middle of a war with the enemy freely roaming your continent is a special kind of stupid. The whole thing is made far worse when you realize that this village doesn't have any form of military to defend themselves either. If they did, they wouldn't have needed to ask Aang to fight for them when the Rough Rhinos come barging in for the episode's climax. Now, maybe you could argue that they're just trying to keep their traditions alive, which I can appreciate, but I've got to imagine that making sure your home is secure takes precedent over your annual holiday celebrations, especially when you're on the losing side of a war that has been lasting for 100 years. You couldn't celebrate this holiday on a smaller scale or something? I don't know, just some way that doesn't involve the entire village gathering in the town square where they're easy pickings for an invasion. And speaking of the town gathering in one place...
Hey, what's that guy doing?
That's right, contrary to Aang, Katara, and Sokka's initial assumptions about this town, Avatar Day is not a holiday dedicated to celebrating the Avatar, but is instead a holiday dedicated to hating the Avatar. Alright, I'm of mixed minds on this. On the one hand, I can totally buy that the Avatar wouldn't necessarily be beloved by everyone throughout the entire world. It's a topic that every form of Avatar media has at least dabbled with. Heck, even The Last Airbender has played with this idea before this episode aired, and that's before you include the likes of Zhao, Zuko, and Azula constantly trying to capture or kill Aang. But on the other hand, this plot point fundamentally misunderstands the nature of annual holiday traditions. Commemorative holidays are celebrated to remember and/or respect an important event or person. Christmas is celebrated because it marks the birth of Jesus Christ, an essential figurehead in Christianity and Catholicism. Memorial Day is a day to remember all the soldiers who gave their lives for the country, etc. I'm not aware of any real-world holidays dedicated to rekindling hatred for important events or persons. I could be completely off base here, but if holidays dedicated to hating something rather than celebrating it was an actual thing in real life, I sincerely doubt that anyone would be trying to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, you might argue that it's different in the Avatar universe, since the Avatar is an ever-present force and isn't a singular historical figure. And that's fair. In fact, this isn't even necessarily a problem with the episode, but I'm not sure that argument holds water when you take into account the reason they hate the Avatars so much, which I'll get to in a minute. Plus, the whole idea of Avatar Day being dedicated to hating the Avatar rather than celebrating it seems to contradict the festive air to the whole event. When Team Avatar first get into town, the tone of the event seems to be a joyous one, but the way the crowd chants "down with the Avatar" suggests a more hateful event. So is Avatar Day a joyful event or a hateful one? You can't have it both ways. Pick a tone, episode! The torchbearer throws the torch at Aang's statue. Wait, how did he get up on that roof? Last time we saw him, he was at the foot of the Aang float. And Katara runs to put out the fire.
That party pooper's ruining Avatar Day!
That party pooper's my friend.
I suggest you leave. You're not welcome here, Avatar.
Why not? Aang helps people.
Ooh, actually, let's stick a pin in this line. I'll come back to it later.
It was Avatar Kyoshi. She murdered our glorious leader, Chin the Great.
We used to be a great society before you killed our leader. Now look at us!
Alright, that's a perfectly reasonable excuse to hate someone. They killed a historical figure that was very important to you. Unfortunately, Katara's next line highlights the problem with this plot point.
Aang would never do something like that. No Avatar would. And it's not fair for you all to question his honor.
Now, Katara does turn out to be wrong about the idea that no Avatar would do something like that, but these people are all about to put Aang on trial for murdering their leader, despite the fact that it was Kyoshi who allegedly killed Chin, not Aang. It makes sense for them to hate Kyoshi, but why hate the Avatar in general? Shouldn't they just hate Kyoshi? It's clearly established in the Avatar universe that each Avatar is considered to be their own individual person, with their own history, personality, and moral principles. They may all be the Avatar reincarnated, but they're still all their own unique person, and they're not responsible for the past person's actions.
One of your previous incarnations tried to slay me.
Of course, that's all behind us. Why should I hold a grudge against you for something in a past life?
This town wants to punish the Avatar for what happened, but in doing so, they are punishing someone who has nothing to do with what Kyoshi did. And what's exponentially worse is that the episode itself seems to think that Aang is culpable for Kyoshi's actions. This problem is obviously lost on the townsfolk, as evidenced by their response to Katara's argument.
Let's tell her her what we think of the Avatar's honor.
But you'll also notice that Katara never argues that Aang and Kyoshi are two different people, and one can't be held accountable for the other person's actions. She talks like Aang and Kyoshi are the same person, when they're clearly not. And Aang's response to being told he's guilty of a crime that someone else might have committed is a request to be given a chance to prove his innocence.
Give me a chance to clear my name.
Aang, you don't need to clear your name! You are not the one being accused of murder here! Like, I can understand wanting to find out if Kyoshi really did commit the murder, but the idea that Aang can be held accountable for Kyoshi's actions is an absurd and dangerous precedent that is never challenged or brought into question. I realize that I'm opening up a rather large can of worms here, but this episode seriously thinks that the descendants of people who committed crimes centuries ago can be held accountable for their ancestors' wrongdoings, and that is an attitude that needs to die. You do not get to demand reparations from someone because their ancestor did something horrible to yours. There is a very fine line between hating a historical figure and holding their descendants liable for it. And yes, I know Aang isn't a direct descendant of Kyoshi, you know what I mean.
The only way to prove your innocence is to stand trial.
Red flag.
You'll have to follow all our rules. That includes paying bail.
No problem. How was I supposed to know they wouldn't take Water Tribe money?
Okay, that was funny, but you guys have a limited supply of money. You really shouldn't have tried to waste it like that. Sokka tells Aang that he shouldn't care if this village hates him or not, and that they should just bust him out and get going.
I can't.
Sure you can. A little swish, 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 airbending slice. And we're on our way.
Savor this moment, everybody. That was the funniest joke in this episode, and it's all downhill from here.
You're supposed to be out saving the world. You can't do that locked up in here.
I can't do that with people thinking I'm a murderer either.
Yeah you can. People's opinion of you has no bearing on whether or not you can do your job as the Avatar. This one village hating you isn't going to make any difference on your job performance. It's not like you yourself murdered anyone. I make a big deal out of this line specifically because it would have been a great setup towards a message about being okay with people not liking you and that universal popularity is a pipe dream, but it never goes that route. So as far as this episode is concerned, universal popularity is important for the Avatar to do his job, which is just dumb. I'm not trying to turn my comment section into a war zone here, but I've got to imagine that being the Avatar is at least somewhat comparable to being a political figure, or at the very least the basic ideal of one. You go into office, do the best job you can with what you're given to work with, and then leave for the next person to take the position, all the while facing criticism for your decisions. You're never going to please everyone, and trying to won't accomplish anything.
You waste time trying to get people to love you. You'll end up the most popular dead man in town.
If the goal was to tell a story about figuring out if a past Avatar committed a crime, that's fine, I like that idea. But there's really no reason for Aang not to be involved in the investigation. The only reason they wrote the episode like this is so they can set up for a joke that really isn't that funny. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Sokka agrees to look into the case, and after getting some new props, he and Katara go to the crime scene to investigate with the mayor.
This is the footprint of the killer, Kyoshi. It was at sunset, 370 years ago today.
Objection!
If that footprint was placed there 370 years ago, how the heck has it lasted for so long, not only being exposed to the elements, but also on the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean? You're telling me that that footprint survived hundreds of years of being exposed to wind, rain, snow, dust, and moisture from the water at the foot of the cliff? Unless the people of this village went to great lengths to preserve this footprint, which they A, clearly didn't, and B, wouldn't have any reason to, there is no way that this footprint survived 370 years of erosion. In fact, there shouldn't be any physical evidence that this crime ever took place. The only real evidence that the mayor has that Kyoshi was the culprit is an oral history passed down from generation to generation, placing her there at the scene of the crime.
She emerged from the temple and struck down Qin the Great. We built this statue to immortalize our great leader.
And that is the problem with the investigation. Most of the evidence doesn't actually support what actually happened. I love the idea of trying to solve a murder mystery where the crime took place centuries ago, but the writers butcher the concept with evidence that doesn't make any sense with that sort of context. The footprint would sort of make sense if the crime took place a few weeks ago, but it didn't, and it's completely at odds with the rest of the evidence in this episode. There is no context in which evidence for a crime that took place over 300 years ago would be the same as evidence for a crime that only happened a few weeks ago, especially not if no real effort was put into preserving said evidence. The mayor wanders off and Sokka takes a closer look at the statue and the temple.
This temple and this statue were cut from the same stone, and we know that the statue was built after Chin died. That means Kiyoshi never set foot in this temple.
Okay, that makes more sense than the footprint, but there's still a few problems with this. 1. That statue and that temple are clearly made from different materials. 2. Even if they were made from the same stuff, you can't prove that they were carved from the exact same rock. 3. Even if they were carved from the same rock, that doesn't prove that they were built at the same time! I wish I could give this episode props for demonstrating how deductive reasoning can help solve cases even when they're centuries old, but the reasoning has to make logical sense. Sokka's detective work here relies far too much on assumptions for his conclusions to be credible. The one thing that I can give the scene is that Katara recognizes that the statue and the temple being built at the same time doesn't necessarily prove Kiyoshi's innocence.
That's a big hole in the mayor's story, but it's not enough to prove Aang's innocence.
Kiyoshi, Katara! Not Aang! Kiyoshi! So Sokka puffs thoughtfully on his bubble pipe for a few seconds before deducing that they need to return to Kyoshi Island.
Where'd you get that?
I don't know, Katara. How did you get on Sokka's left side when you were clearly standing over by the statue a second ago? They get to Kyoshi Island and the village elders take them to Kyoshi's shrine to look for evidence. On the way, they pass the Kyoshi warriors' dojo, and Sokka asks what Suki's been up to.
Actually, she and the other warriors left to fight in the war. She said you inspired her, and she wanted to help change the world.
Oh, well, that's great.
Ah, a tale as old as time. Boy meets girl, girl beats boy up, boy falls in love with girl. Ain't love a wondrous thing? They get to the shrine and immediately start touching all of Kyoshi's relics.
These were her boots? Her feet must have been enormous.
The biggest of any avatar.
Your name is Tarantino, isn't it?
Wait a minute. Big feet? Little footprints? There's no way.
Special outfit, hat and pipe, these things mean anything to you?
Okay, credit where it's due. While a lot of the evidence and logic of the investigation doesn't really hold up, Sokka's insistence that he be the one to solve the case makes it that much more fun to watch. It has the air of someone who wants to solve a riddle or a puzzle without anyone telling them the answer, which is something I think most people can relate to, and he and Katara play off one another really well.
So if they were built at the same time, that means...
Shh! I want to solve it! There's no way Kiyoshi could have made that footprint, and therefore there is nothing linking her to the crime scene.
Brilliant, Sokka.
And I've already complained about the footprint as a plot point, so let's move on to the prison scene where Aang is talking with the other prisoners about his love life. Not much really to say here. I skipped over the part where they set the scene up with the tone being all scary to make you think Aang's gonna have a rough time in jail, only for the payoff to be that they're a bunch of softies who encourage Aang to keep on keeping on. It doesn't advance Aang's character or the plot in any way, it's just a bunch of comedy to pad the runtime. And it is funny, but you could easily skip it and not miss a thing. Now, if Aang had asked one of them for a rock hammer, that would be something. Back over on Kyoshi Island, Sokka, Katara, and Tarantino are looking at a painting that depicts the founding of Kyoshi Island.
It was painted at sunrise on the day this island was founded. Why, it was today, in fact. 370 years ago.
370 years? Wait, are you sure it was today?
Well, seeing how it's Kyoshi Day, yes.
So Sokka examines the painting, and by judging the angle of the shadows, he deduces that it was painted at sunset, not sunrise.
So what?
If Kyoshi was in the ceremony at sunset, she couldn't have been in Chin committing the crime. She has an alibi.
Alright, so at this point in the review, I was all set to go on this great big, long-winded rant about how it doesn't make any flippin' sense for Kyoshi to have been the one to commit the crime if it took place 370 years ago, since if you do the math, 370 years minus Aang's age minus Avatar Roku's officially listed age at his death, that would mean that for Kyoshi to have been the one to commit the crime, she would have had to have lived for well over 200 years, and how the idea that she could have lived for so long is absolutely ridiculous. Well, it turns out she did. Yeah, the official Avatar wiki states that she lived to the ripe old age of 230, with the source being a bit of text from an old online game called Welcome to Republic City that used to be on Nick.com. And there is a small bit of world building in the Kyoshi novels that does support the idea that she'd be able to live for so long. Granted, this is all supplementary material released after the fact, and relying on retroactive continuity to fill in plot holes is not a precedent I think anyone should set for any franchise, looking at you, Star Wars. But I'm less inclined to give them trouble for this, seeing as the Kyoshi novels are one of the few examples of a good prequel series out there. Seriously guys, the Kyoshi novels have no business being as good as they are. You really should check them out. And on a more plot relevant note, Congratulations, episode! You finally presented a piece of evidence that actually makes sense! They go back to the village of Chin and tell the mayor what they found, but the mayor isn't interested.
Evidence? That's not how our court system works.
Is that also a red flag?
Crimson.
Then how can I prove my innocence?
Simple. I say what happened, and then you say what happened, and then I decide who's right.
Oh, so that's where Twitter got their sense of justice. As if I needed any more reason to hate this episode. The next morning, they start the trial, and the mayor presents his argument.
Everyone loved Chin the Great because he was so great. Then the Avatar showed up and killed him, and that's how it happened.
I might have made that Twitter joke a little too soon. So it's Aang's turn to present his argument, and he flubs every single piece of evidence.
I'm about to tell you what really happened. You see, I have very large feet. Furthermore, your temple matches your statue. But I was in a painting at sunset. So there you have it. I'm not guilty.
Are you kidding me? Look, I know that this is supposed to be funny, but the joke really starts falling apart when you realize that Aang, Sokka, and Katara are nowhere near this stupid. They obviously told Aang what all the evidence was beforehand, but they didn't go over it with him to make sure that he could form the evidence into a cohesive argument? I don't expect these kids to have a basic understanding of trial proceedings, especially when the townsfolk themselves clearly don't, but if they're seriously trying to play along with a system that they know for a fact is rigged against them, then I do expect them to be as careful as possible with how they present their arguments. This isn't like that scene in My Cousin Vinny where the defense attorney freezes up and starts stammering uncontrollably because he has a fear of speaking publicly, and clearly doesn't have that problem, and he's still demonstrating a clear misunderstanding of the evidence he was given. He is not that stupid! And even if I am talking out of my butt here, and it is perfectly reasonable that Aang, Katara, and Sokka would goof up like this, that still means that the entire investigation, the entire second act, a good third of the episode, was a complete waste of time. None of the evidence Sokka and Katara found during their investigation plays a part in the resolution of the trial. It was all just built up to this one joke that isn't anywhere near funny enough to justify that amount of time wasted.
Your blade. It did not come deep enough.
Alright, there's been a lot of complaining throughout this review, so let's cut over to Zuko and Iroh's subplot. Zuko has donned the blue spirit mask again in order to hide his identity while he steals food for him and Iroh. At first, he only does this to survive, but his thievery quickly devolves into stealing in excess, and I love this scene so much! For context, this is only a few episodes after Azula tried to capture them, and they've been having a very hard time surviving without the resources that they're used to operating with. Zuko tries to hide his thievery from his uncle, but Iroh's not that stupid, especially since he was there when Zuko stole the Earth Kingdom family's ostrich horse. But being the never-ending well of patience that he is, he never berates Zuko for stealing. Rather, he empathizes with him and shows understanding for why he'd stoop to that level.
I know we've had some difficult times lately. We've had to struggle just to get by. But it's nothing to be ashamed of. There is a simple honor in poverty.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a scene that doesn't demonstrate why Iroh is so loved, but this scene in particular demonstrates his love for his nephew. He recognizes that being angry and berating him won't get through to him, given his history with his father, and goes for a more supportive approach. Of course, Zuko is still operating under the misconception that his dad has to give him his honor back.
Even if you did capture the Avatar, I'm not so sure it would solve our problems. Not now.
And there is no hope at all.
And Iroh's response is probably his third best speech in the entire series, which, given his track record, is still pretty impressive.
Allow yourself to slip down that road and you surrender to your lowest instincts. In the darkest times, hope is something you give yourself. That is the meaning of inner strength.
You know, I'm not gonna ruin this by explaining why it's so good. It speaks for itself. I just can't do it justice. This scene is awesome. We cut back over to the trial where Katara has the idea of calling forth a witness to the crime, Avatar Kyoshi herself. Oh God, why?
What are you doing?
Well, she is Aang's past life. Maybe wearing her stuff will trigger something.
I do believe in the power of stuff.
Really? Was it the power of stuff that allowed you to halt the trial proceedings, fly all the way back to Kyoshi Island, convince Tarantino to let you borrow their priceless Avatar relics, fly back to the village of Jin, and get Aang dressed up so you could pull this ridiculous stunt? Or was it the power of stuff that gave you the foresight to borrow Kyoshi's equipment from Tarantino ahead of time, long before you could possibly know you'd need it for this farce? Truly, the power of stuff knows no bounds! I am in such awe of the power of stuff that I shall convert to the religion of stuff so that I may worship stuff, live my life according to the doctrine of stuff, and spread the gospel of stuff. I only hope that one day I live my life well enough according to stuff that I might go to stuff heaven where I shall spend the rest of eternity surrounded by stuff. All hail the great power of stuff!
Hey everybody, Avatar Kyoshi here.
Am I dead yet? The mayor is just as tired of this absurdity as I am and is all set to declare Aang guilty when...
I killed Chin the Conqueror.
So Kyoshi explains that Chin was a horrible tyrant who was bent on conquering the entire Earth Kingdom, and when he came to the peninsula where Kyoshi lived, she told him to bug off. When he wouldn't back down, she went into the Avatar state and broke the peninsula off from the mainland and pushed it out into the ocean, forming Kyoshi Island. Chin, too stubborn to flee with the rest of his army, fell from the cliff as the remnants of the peninsula's neck fell into the water below.
I created Kyoshi Island so my people could be safe from invaders.
Okay, couple of notes. 1. How does turning your peninsula into an island prevent invaders from reaching you? Wouldn't Chin have a navy or something? 2. Why would you only be concerned with whether or not Chin invaded your home, but not anyone else in the Earth Kingdom? The way you tell the story, it sounds like you were waiting for him at the peninsula, rather than going out to him personally and taking him down. You're the Avatar! Your job is to maintain balance throughout the world, not just this one spot in the Earth Kingdom. 3. How is this story not well known? I can buy that the town of Jin would pass down a more biased version of the story, but how does the rest of the world not know more specifics? More to the point, how does Kyoshi Island not know more specifics? Surely the act of turning a peninsula into an island to save you from a tyrant would be a pretty important, not to mention memorable, event in your history. And don't tell me it's because the 100-Year War destroyed their records. Kyoshi Island was left out of the war up until Suki took the Kyoshi warriors out to fight in it, which only happened like 5 minutes ago.
Kyoshi stayed out of the war so far, and we intend to keep it that way.
Look, I'm not saying Kyoshi was wrong to do what she did, but the way she tells the story doesn't really paint her in the most sympathetic light. There are simply too many plot holes here for me to say that she acted selflessly. There might be some supplementary material that explains away these plot holes, but as it stands, all Kyoshi did here was kill a guy who tried to conquer her home, but only after she let him take everyone else's. So with the reveal that Kyoshi only killed Chin indirectly, and that his death was totally justified, the mayor drops the charges on it.
And I find you guilty.
For God's sakes, Avatar Day! There's only so many times I can make fun of Twitter without it becoming repetitive! Stop giving me opportunities! Well, at least Aang recognizes that the guilty verdict is ridiculous, and he—
I said I would face justice, so I will.
What? What the— Look, I am really sorry that I keep beating this dead horse here, but even if we completely ignore the absurdity of punishing one person because of something that someone else did, Kyoshi's testimony proves that she was in the right. Even Aang, a pacifist, admits that Kyoshi's actions were justifiable later in the show.
But you didn't really kill Shin. Technically, he fell to his own doom because he was too stubborn to get out of the way.
I mean, the stunt with the Kyoshi getup was stupid, but that at least was an attempt to contest the town's BS legal system and the charges brought against Aang. But now they're just giving up? They're willing to put Aang's life, and by extension the fate of the world, on the line simply to satisfy this one town's misplaced drive for justice? After all the effort the gang put into clearing the Avatar's name, and considering what they're putting at risk with this decision, I simply cannot buy that they just give up like this. Certainly not on the slim chance that the wheel lands on the one punishment that doesn't involve anything fatal.
Community service! Please stop on community service!
And sure, Aang agreed to follow all of the town's rules, but the fact that they're still trying to punish him, even after learning why Kyoshi did what she did, demonstrates that they're being completely irrational. It feels like the episode is trying to go for moral ambiguity, but they have just finished demonstrating that the townsfolk has no reason to blame the Avatar, much less Aang, for what happened. This isn't justice, this is stupid!
Which concussion did you suffer that made you think any of this was a good idea?
Aang spins the wheel of punishment and it lands on boiled in oil. But before they can carry out the sentence, the rough rhinos from the start of the episode show up and demand their immediate surrender.
You, Avatar, do something!
Alright, before we go over Aang's response to the mayor's pleas for help, let's talk about that line that I pinned earlier.
You're not welcome here, Avatar.
Why not? Aang helps people.
The desire to help others is a trait that's relatively ubiquitous in fiction. Most protagonists are motivated by this desire in one way or another, which isn't all that surprising given that it's both the simplest character trait to work with, and one of the best ways to ensure that a character is sympathetic. Not all characters, mind you. Heck, not even all protagonists necessarily have to be selfless to be sympathetic, but as a general rule, being selfless is a good step towards making the audience want to root for the character. And it's safe to say that Aang is especially motivated by this, not only being the Avatar, a being whose purpose is to maintain peace and order in the world, but also being a pacifist, only ever using an amount of force that is absolutely necessary to end a fight. And he doesn't pick and choose who gets to be saved, he tries to protect everyone. Again, not always, he wasn't exactly jumping at the bit to help the fishing village in the Painted Lady, but that can just as easily be chalked up to the village not being in any immediate danger, and his accepting Sokka's logic about defeating the Fire Lord being a more permanent solution to the village's problems. If Aang can save someone, he will. He goes out of his way to save Zuko from Zhao in the Blue Spirit, despite Zuko's repeated attempts to capture him, and he makes a point of rescuing him again during the Siege of the North, despite the fact that Zuko had literally just kidnapped him and dragged him out into the frozen tundra. When General Fong and his soldiers were attacking Aang, trying to force him into the Avatar state, he spends the entire fight avoiding the soldiers rather than fighting back. He spends the first half of the series finale trying to figure out a way to stop the Fire Lord without taking his life. Even while Ozai was actively trying to kill him, even when he had two perfectly good opportunities to end the fight, Aang would not do it because taking advantage of both opportunities would mean ending Ozai's life. So, with all that in mind, how does Aang respond to the mayor's pleas for help?
Gee, I'd love to help, but I'm supposed to be boiled in oil.
There, community service! Now serve our community and get rid of those rhinos!
Tactical nuke incoming!
Need to borrow your ray shop again.
Fine, just don't scratch the paint job again.
Words cannot describe how much I hate this scene. The very idea, the mere implication that Aang would be okay with the Fire Nation taking over this village is so insulting, so contrary to Aang's character, that it is an absolute miracle to me that this episode isn't talked about more. This is Batman killing people levels of out of character. How could anyone be okay with the main character of the story, the hero, letting a people be conquered and oppressed because he didn't like them very much? I don't care that they were going to kill him. I don't care that they demonstrated an irrational hatred towards him. He would never, ever let that happen. The real Aang wouldn't even need to be asked for help. By the time the mayor thought to hide behind the nearest object, Aang would have been out of that Kyoshi getup and up the stairs kicking the rhinos' collective behinds. Heck, even if we ignore the character assassination angle, Aang's attitude with this response is completely at odds with how he's been behaving throughout the episode. When he spins the wheel, he mentions that he needs to face justice, yet the second he sees an opportunity to get out of punishment, he takes it. If he was so willing to pay for his crimes, why would he effectively blackmail the mayor to get out of facing punishment? You might argue that it's because the punishment in question was being boiled in oil, but considering the other options on that wheel...
Come on, torture machine! Eaten by bears! Razor pit!
That just makes me question even more why he'd want to go through with it! I know that in the grand scheme of things, Aang needs to escape the situation, but they butchered his character to get him out of it, and they did not have to. All they needed to do was have the rough rhinos come in, have Aang save the village, and out of gratitude, they drop the charges and send him on his way. That's not a complex bit of writing that I had to think long and hard on to come up with. It's a very simple, very obvious solution. But hey, the writers had a comedy quota to fill, and mildly funny jokes are way more important than character consistency!
Thank you for playing, should we? Or should we not? Follow the advice of the galactically stupid!
But, as much as I hate everything else leading up to it, at least the episode has the fight scene going for it, right? I mean, even The Great Divide had a decent fight scene at the end, and that episode sucks.
Boo! You disappoint me in every way possible!
This fight scene is terrible. It starts off strong enough with Aang throwing the spear guy off the cliff, the same cliff that they clearly established was high enough that a drop from it would be fatal. What the? But it quickly loses all of its energy when the rhinos head into the town to burn the place. Katara ties up the chain guy and sends his rhino charging off, but the way she does it is so slow and methodical, you'd swear you were watching an RPG battle. And when she cuts the strap off the archer guy's saddle, she barely uses any water. There's no martial arts on display, nothing visually impressive going on, nothing that Avatar fight scenes are known for. Sokka's contribution to the fight isn't much better. There's some nice demonstration of his resourcefulness, and the bit where he gets his boomerang back is a nice moment.
Boomerang! You do always come back!
But it still suffers from the same problems that the rest of the fight does. It's slow. Stuff that should be quick, chaotic, and exciting feels stiff, sluggish, and boring. Aang's fight with the leader is a bit better, even if I have a hard time taking it seriously with Aang's Kyoshi makeup, but even that is ruined by how the fight ends. Yeah, that's it. No continuation of the fight after Aang knocks him down. No driving the leader out of the village. He just knocks him off the saddle, and that's the end of that. Because firebenders are completely incapable of fighting if they're not riding something. What a load. Alright, let's wrap this up. The mayor throws Team Avatar a party, because of course he does, proclaiming that they will celebrate a new Avatar Day from now on, and they feed everybody unfried dough.
May we eat it and be reminded of how on this day the Avatar was not boiled in oil.
Wow, what a coincidence! I also enjoy giving myself salmonella as an annual holiday tradition. Eating large quantities of uncooked dough is great fun!
This is by far the worst town we've ever been to.
Preach, Sokka. I have a sneaking suspicion that when the producers were working out the budget for this show, they deliberately gave Avatar Day a smaller budget to work with so they could spend that money on episodes that were more expensive to produce. Now, I have nothing wrong with that. I can appreciate that this episode sucks so that episodes like Zuko Alone, The Blind Bandit, or even Crossroads of Destiny could be made as good as they are. But that doesn't mean I can give Avatar Day a pass, especially not after it spits in the face of the main character and everything that he stands for. The moralizing is ridiculous at best, there are several continuity errors in the animation, the investigation and evidence are absurd, and while the comedy is still just as good as it usually is, it still comes at the cost of one of the most out-of-character moments I have ever seen. The only reason anyone would have to watch this episode is Zuko and Iroh's subplot, and even then, nothing all that important happens. The only thing you really need to know is that Zuko and Iroh temporarily split up. Sure, Zuko's thievery is an interesting point of his character arc, but it's far from an essential step. I know the Great Divide is bad, but I'll take lying to end a century-long feud as a good idea over take responsibility for something you had no involvement in any day of the week and twice on Sunday. And don't get the wrong idea. If you're responsible for something, be it an immoral act or an honest mistake, apologizing is the bare minimum that should be done in order to make it right. But apologizing for something you didn't do is about as smart as throwing a party in the middle of a war. I'm Officer Happy. And I think I need to come up with a less destructive way to express my frustration.
You think?
We're done here!